I'd seen her before, though never for more than a passing moment. Usually when I was leaving and she was arriving, or when I was carrying something too heavy and she'd tilt her head, like she was about to offer help but thought better of it. That morning, I was just killing time at the corner coffee shop. It was small enough that the bell above the door always sounded too loud, and the barista knew I'd order a black coffee even when I glanced at the pastry case. I'd sit near the window, scrolling through my phone, half writing texts I'd never send. The bell rang, and there she was. My friend's mom. I don't know why I still thought of her that way, probably because it was easier than using her name. She was in her 40s, though the exact number didn't matter. She carried herself like she knew she was noticed but didn't particularly care. That morning, she wore a dark coat and carried a stainless steel thermos, the kind that looks like it's been on too many commutes. She spotted me before I had time to look away. "You're up early," she said. Her tone was casual, but her eyes lingered, as though she was checking if I'd been waiting for someone else. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. I gave a small shrug, like it wasn't worth explaining. She smiled, not wide, but the kind that deepened the lines near her mouth. "That's when coffee does the most damage." She ordered her drink and, instead of leaving, sat across from me. It wasn't crowded, plenty of open tables, but she set her bag down and smoothed her coat, like it was the most natural thing. I folded the paper napkin in front of me, edge to edge, then again. I didn't know where to put my eyes. She filled the silence easily. "You always sit here," she said, nodding toward the window. "Yeah. Habit, I guess. Habits are just comfort dressed up as routine." She said it lightly, like she was testing the words on me. I half smiled. "And what's your habit?" Her hand brushed the thermos as she answered. "Carrying this thing everywhere. Makes me look busy even when I'm not." The barista set her latte down, and for a while we just sat, the steam fogging the glass between us and the street outside. She tapped her fingers against the cup, her nails short, no polish. My eyes flicked down before I caught myself. Strong-looking hands. She noticed. Her mouth curved slightly. "Your hands look strong." She let the words hang there, almost amused by how I stiffened in my seat. Then, softer, "Prove it." I wasn't sure if she meant anything by it, if it was a joke, or a test, or just one of those things adults say when they forget you're not quite one of them. So I laughed quietly, more air than sound. "Not sure what you want me to do." "Crush the cup." She tilted her head, studied me for a beat longer than necessary. Then she let it go. "Maybe later," she said, sipping her coffee. We talked about smaller things after that, how the weather kept threatening rain but never delivered, how her son never called when he said he would, how I kept the same sneakers until the soles wore thin. The kind of talk that slips by until you realize it's already dark outside. When she finally stood, sliding her coat back on, she hesitated before leaving. Her phone buzzed once in her bag. She didn't check it. Instead, she looked at me, almost like she was about to say something she decided against. "See you around," she said. The bell above the door rang too loud again. I stared at the napkin I'd folded into a tight square, still resting by my coffee. My phone buzzed on the table. One new message. From her. Just 2 words, "Don't vanish." The message stayed on my screen longer than it should have. Don't vanish. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pull me back into her orbit the next day, when she knocked on my door holding the package that had been misdelivered to her apartment. "You should probably tell them you moved," she said, handing me the box. "Unless you like me showing up." I caught the trace of humor in her voice, but something else too. I thanked her, trying not to sound too eager, and invited her in. She hesitated, then stepped over the threshold. Her coat hung from her arm, her bag resting on the chair I motioned toward. She looked around like she was taking in the pieces of a life that hadn't fully started yet: bare walls, a couch that was more functional than comfortable, books stacked instead of shelved. Looks temporary, she said, not unkindly. Yeah. Guess I haven't figured out what feels permanent yet. She nodded, her gaze catching on the half-empty mug of tea on the table. Without asking, she picked it up and sniffed. Chamomile. You drink this every night? Most nights, I admitted. It helps me, not think so much. She set the cup back down, slowly. I used to drink it when my marriage was falling apart. Kept me company more than he did. The words slipped out, and I could tell she hadn't planned on saying them. She shifted, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, as though that could take them back. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just nodded, quietly folding the edge of the cardboard box she'd brought. The silence sat heavy, but not uncomfortable. You know this is, she started, then stopped. Her eyes flicked toward me, then down at her hands resting on her lap. Strong hands, still. Complicated. I know. The words came out before I could second-guess them. She laughed, soft and breathy. You don't even know what part one mean. Does it matter? Her gaze lingered on me then, searching, as though she was weighing the years between us, the friendship that tethered me to her son, the quiet rules neither of us had written but both knew were there. I imagined her leaving, saying nothing more, letting the whole thing dissolve into the air. I imagined myself pretending it had never started. Both versions left me restless. Instead, she reached for the thermos she always carried. She unscrewed the lid and poured a little of whatever she had left into my mug without asking. Green tea this time. Try it, she said, sliding it back toward me. I did. Bitter, earthy. Not at all what I expected. She watched me over the rim of her own cup, her expression unreadable. Then, just before she left, she touched my wrist, brief, almost accidental, but enough to freeze me in place. Don't get used to this, she murmured. And then she was gone. After that night with the tea, things changed in ways neither of us acknowledged out loud. She knocked more often, sometimes to return something borrowed, sometimes with no excuse at all. And I didn't stop her. One evening, she asked if I could help her carry groceries upstairs. Just 2 bags, nothing heavy, but she stood there at my door like it mattered that I said yes. Her apartment was warmer than mine, lived in. Books stacked in odd places, framed photos leaning instead of hanging, a candle burned halfway down. She set the bags on the counter, brushing her hair back with the back of her wrist. Stay for tea? She asked, almost offhand. I did. We sat at her small kitchen table, steam fogging between us. Her thermos sat unopened beside her, forgotten for once. She talked about her son, my friend, as though saying his name might remind her why this was wrong. She trailed off mid-sentence, staring at her cup instead. I filled the silence with a question I didn't mean to ask. Do you ever regret it? Divorce, I mean. Her hand stilled. A faint smile, but not quite. Every day. And not at all. She didn't look at me when she said it. Something shifted then. The air seemed too close. I traced the rim of my cup with my thumb, thinking of a dozen things I shouldn't say. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling like she'd just remembered the rules. That's when the knock came. Her neighbor, an older man, poked his head in before she could answer. Just checking, heard voices. Thought maybe your son was visiting. His eyes flicked to me, then back to her, the implication hanging heavy. She smiled politely, said something about groceries, and closed the door faster than necessary. We both laughed, but not from amusement. More like relief pressed too tight. The moment was broken. Still, I couldn't leave. Not yet. She busied herself at the sink, rinsing a mug that was already clean. Her shoulders stiff, her movements too careful. I wanted to say something to ease it, but the words stayed stuck. When she finally turned back, her gaze landed on me and didn't move. Long enough that I forgot to breathe. You should, she began, then stopped. Her hands twisted the towel she was holding. You should go before people start thinking, I don't care what they think. My voice sounded strange in the room, too certain for how unsure I felt. Her lips parted like she might answer, but instead she stepped closer. Close enough that I noticed the faint scent of her shampoo, the way her pulse moved at her neck. We stood there, neither moving, silence pressing in from every direction. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, just once, then back to mine. If I had leaned forward an inch, just one, everything would have changed. But I didn't. And neither did she. It was late afternoon when she asked if I wanted to walk. No reason, just a small shrug and, the air feels better outside than in. We circled the block slowly, her steps unhurried, hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. I kept mine at my sides, fingers brushing against the chill, resisting the urge to shove them deep into my jeans the way I usually did. We passed people without noticing. A couple laughing too loudly, a kid kicking a ball into the street. All background. What mattered was the silence between us, long, elastic, like it might snap. She stopped at a bench under a half-dead tree and sat down. I joined her, careful not to sit too close. The distance felt like a rule she hadn't spoken. For a while, neither of us said anything. She watched the traffic lights change even when no cars came. I traced the cracks in the pavement with my eyes. Then, without looking at me, she said, I don't think I can keep doing this. My chest tightened. Doing what? Her laugh was sharp, without humor. Pretending. Acting like I don't notice how you look at me. Acting like I don't, she cut herself off, pressed her lips together. I wanted to fill the silence, but I didn't trust what might come out. Finally, she turned, her expression rawer than I'd ever seen it. You're my son's friend. Do you understand what that means? How it would look? Her voice was low, not angry, more like pleading. I'm not a kid, I said, too quickly. That's not the point. She shook her head, eyes closing for a moment. You make me feel, she stopped again, exhaling through her nose. Like I'm 25 and reckless. And I don't know if I can afford to feel that way anymore. The words sank in, heavier than they sounded. She wasn't just talking about me. She was talking about herself, the years she'd carried, the life she'd already lived and dismantled. I stared at my hands, knuckles pale against the bench. Strong hands, she'd called them once. I wanted to reach for hers, to prove something I couldn't name, but I didn't. Instead, I asked quietly, so what do we do? Her laugh softened this time, almost breaking. We stop before it's too late. But she didn't move away. She stayed right there, her knee brushing mine when she shifted. Her hand lay between us on the bench, open, waiting, or maybe just tired. I looked at it too long, imagined closing the space, imagined how it would feel to let my fingers fit against hers. She must have felt my stare because she slowly curled her hand into a fist, pulling it back into her lap. Her eyes met mine again, glassy now. Don't make me say it. I didn't. I couldn't. The streetlight above us flickered on though the sun wasn't fully down yet, throwing us in a half-light that felt like it belonged only to us. We sat there, both of us knowing the line had been drawn, both of us too close to crossing it. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I didn't see her in the hall, didn't hear the soft knock at my door. Even the coffee shop felt different, her seat by the window empty, my own reflection staring back at me in the glass like I'd been waiting for nothing. I told myself not to notice. Not to care. But habits have a way of turning into expectations, and her absence hung heavier than her presence ever had. By the fourth day, I caved and sent a text, "You okay?" I watched the screen for too long. No reply. That evening, I ran into her son, my friend, outside the building. He was carrying a duffel bag, on his way somewhere. He clapped me on the shoulder like always, but then he said, been home all week. Feels weird seeing Mom around so much. I froze, nodded, tried to laugh. But the words burned. She'd been here. Just not with me. When I finally saw her again, it wasn't how I expected. She was in the lobby, dressed in something sharper than usual, a dark blouse, hair done like she had somewhere to be. She almost didn't notice me until I spoke. "Hey." My voice came out rougher than I intended. She paused, then smiled politely, too politely. "Hey." I wanted to ask where she was going, who she was meeting. But the question stayed in my throat, bitter. Instead, I said, "Haven't seen you around." "Busy," she replied quickly. Then softer, trying to be. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at the screen, then slipped it into her bag without answering. I nodded, but inside it twisted. Busy. Trying to be. With who? For who? We stood there, neither moving, like strangers stuck at the same intersection. Finally, she reached out, her fingers grazing my arm. "It's not you. Just, sometimes I remember I have a life outside this building. That's all." I wanted to believe her. But the distance in her eyes told me there was more she wasn't saying. An ex. Someone new. Or maybe just the weight of me, what I meant, what I threatened to mean. I opened my mouth, then closed it. She gave me a smile I didn't trust, then walked out the door, heels clicking against the tile. I went back upstairs, sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in hand. I typed, "Do you want me to stop?" I stared at it, thumb hovering. Then I locked the screen without sending it. The message stayed there, unsent. And her seat at the coffee shop stayed empty. It was raining when it happened. Not a storm, just a steady, thin kind of rain that makes the world look blurred at the edges. I'd just come back from the store when I saw her standing outside the building, umbrella forgotten at her side, jacket damp at the shoulders. She looked up when I stopped. For a second, I thought she might walk past me, but she didn't. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I nodded, though my chest was already tight. We ended up in her kitchen, both dripping onto the tile. She handed me a towel like it was something routine, then leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I saw your message," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. "I didn't send it." "No," she said. Her eyes softened. "But you wrote it." We stood there in the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of a clock on the wall. Ordinary sounds, but they made everything else sharper. Finally, she sighed. "This isn't fair. To you. To me. To anyone. Then why can't we stop?" I asked before I could think better of it. Her eyes closed, just for a beat. "Because you remind me of who I was before, all of this." She gestured vaguely, as if to cover divorce, motherhood, middle age, everything. "And I don't know if I'm allowed to want that again." I stepped closer, towel still in my hand. Not touching her, just closer. "You're allowed." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She pressed her fingers to her forehead like she was trying to hold something back. Then she let out a laugh, thin and shaky. "You don't understand what this could cost me." "I do," I said. My voice was low, steady. "And I don't care." Silence stretched again. Her eyes searched mine, desperate, afraid, and something else, something that had been flickering at the edges for weeks. She reached out then, fingertips grazing my wrist. Not the casual touch from before. This was deliberate. Her hand trembled slightly against mine, but she didn't pull away. "This is wrong," she whispered. "Maybe," I answered. "But it's real." Her breath caught. She looked at me like she was weighing all the years between us, all the ways this could collapse. Then she let her hand slip fully into mine. No kiss, no grand gesture. Just her hand, warm and certain despite the tremor. We stood like that, rain still tapping faintly against the window, the clock ticking on. She finally smiled, tired, sad, but genuine. Okay. Just that. One word. Enough to make the room feel different. And for the first time, it didn't feel like we were pretending. Weeks turned into months, though I'm not sure when the shift happened. Nothing dramatic marked the change. No announcements, no confessions shouted across a rain-soaked street. Just small adjustments, like pieces of furniture being moved so gradually you don't notice until the room feels different. She still carried her thermos, though now she let me refill it sometimes. I still ordered my black coffee at the shop on the corner, but more mornings than not, she was already there, a book open, waiting. Not waiting for me, exactly, but not surprised when I sat down across from her. We didn't talk about rules anymore. We didn't have to. What had felt like trespassing before slowly became a kind of quiet routine. Her son came and went, never suspicious. Life around us kept happening, groceries, laundry, bills, calls that went unanswered. But in the spaces in between, we found each other. One evening, we ended up back at the same bench where she once told me we had to stop. The tree overhead looked even deader than before, stripped bare for winter. She leaned against the armrest, watching the empty street. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "All the time," I said. She smiled faintly. "Me too. Funny how close we came to ruining it before it even began." The word ruining hung there, but it didn't sting. Because we hadn't. Her hand slid into mine, without hesitation this time. No tremor, no retreat. Just the weight of it, warm against the cold air. We sat in silence, the kind that didn't press anymore. It just was. Back at her apartment later, she made tea, green for her, chamomile for me. She set my cup down in front of me and laughed when I traced the rim with my thumb, the same way I had months ago. "You're a creature of habit," she said. "And you're not." I nodded toward the thermos sitting on her counter. "Touché." She shook her head, amused, then leaned against the counter, watching me drink. I remembered something she once said in passing, about habits being comfort disguised as routine. Maybe she'd been right. But sitting there, steam fogging between us, her hand resting casually on my shoulder as she moved past me, comfort didn't feel like a disguise. It felt earned. Later, when I left, she followed me to the door. We didn't linger like we used to, afraid of crossing invisible lines. Instead, she smiled, that small, tired smile that had slowly softened into something else over time. 8:47, she said suddenly. I frowned. "What?" "That's the time you always walk into the coffee shop." "I never told you I noticed." I laughed quietly, shaking my head. "Guess I'm predictable." "No," she said, softer now. "You're steady." Her eyes held mine for a moment longer, and that was enough.